Hello, everyone. Let's go ahead and settle in for a compassion meditation. You can find a comfortable seat. If you're sitting on the floor, just go ahead and build your posture from the ground up, hips higher than the knees, and spine stacking. Shoulders lightly drawn back, shoulder blades coming together. And we can practice that mudra of compassion that we learned. Left hand underneath the right hand, and thumbs gently touching, representing the union of compassion and wisdom. And you can rest that gently in your lap or just right around the navel point. And then from there, continuing stack up, ears can be over the shoulders, head just ever so gently tucked forward, that cultivating introspection. And then finally, eyes can be lightly open, just gently gazing in the space in front of you. Tongue touching the roof of the mouth. And we'll settle in for a 24-minute practice. So in this practice, we're cultivating the spirit of emergence, emergence from suffering. We begin by attending to our own experience of suffering. Just allowing our body's speech and mind to settle first in their natural states. And bringing to mind this large space of awareness, the suffering from which you would love to be free. We're not merely suppressing or avoiding it, but really becoming free. You may think, first of all, the mental suffering, the distress, anxiety, depression, all sufferings we carry in the mind. And also the sufferings we bear with the body, and the sufferings of body and mind to which we are vulnerable, even if we do not experiencing them now or in the recent past. Consider then the possibilities of freedom. And one possibility is that these types of suffering of body and mind would simply no longer arise. How good that would be. But there is a second option that at times may be more viable. The possibility that even though the distress arises in the mind and body, it doesn't get to us. It doesn't grip us, take hold of us, and we don't have to resist it. We release from any grasping and we rest in a larger space of awareness, which is absolutely not one of suppression or recoiling or dissociation. It is just utterly present without grasping. In whatever way comes to you, imagine the possibility of that. And then with each in breath, arouse this heart of compassion for yourself with the yearning, may I be free of suffering of body and mind. And with each in breath, imagine drawing in the darkness of that suffering, dissolving it into the radiant orb of light at your heart, drawing in the suffering, drawing in the grasping onto it, and the identification with that suffering. And imagine being free of such suffering. And now, even more subtly, imagine being free of any grasping onto such suffering, so that it merely arises within the field of experience, without having an owner and without our latching onto it. And we can imagine ourselves again in that state, unperturbed, free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And now bring to mind a person whom you may know very well, someone who is going through a difficult time. It may be a serious illness. It may be psychological distress, perhaps deep depression, maybe an interpersonal conflict, a difficult marriage, problem with a job. So many ways we can suffer. And bring to mind vividly such a person. Let this person's reality be your own by attending closely. And with each in breath, arouse this heart of compassion. May you, like myself, be free of suffering. May you find relief. And with each in breath, draw in the darkness of this person's pain and suffering. Dissolve it into the light at your heart without trace. And imagine them becoming free of the suffering, or at the very least, free of the grasping onto and the identification with the suffering. Imagine them finding greater space so that the suffering doesn't occupy their entire world. And imagine them in that state, free of suffering and the causes of suffering, working toward the conditions for flourishing, unperturbed by the fluctuations of the mind and our external world. And now let your awareness rove out, bringing to mind either another individual, a community, or a region of the globe where right now there is great suffering. And again, practice as before. Let your awareness, the field of your awareness, expand in all directions. And with each in breath, imagine drawing in the suffering of this community, region, or person. And dissolving it in the light of your heart with the yearning. May we all be free of suffering and abandon the causes of suffering. And we'll continue practicing in silence. And you may continue to hold yourself in the space of compassion or imagining as far as your imagination can rove, encompassing the entire world, or bringing to mind specific people and specific circumstances, and extending that aspiration. May you be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And just continuing to breathe in the suffering and breathe and extend out relief. To anyone who comes to mind, or even just for the countless beings, each in their own way, attempting to avoid suffering and find happiness. Envision a world where that is the reality. And at any time throughout this practice, we can return back to ourselves, continuing with that aspiration. May I be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And allowing that to become a reality. And now for just the last moments of this practice, leave all this world and the sentient inhabitants, each flourishing, free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And we can drop all appearances to imagination, objects of the mind. And for just a moment, rest in the luminous purity of your own awareness. Simply aware of being aware. And let's bring this session to a close. Well, thank you all for joining me in practice. May this serve your highest good, highest aspirations. And we can just offer out any of that compassion, ease, well-being that may have arisen from engaging in this practice. Send that out to anyone who may be in need, and certainly anchor in the benefits and sensations that you've cultivated in your own practice. Be well.